Welcome to the Construction Brothers Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Campbell. With me, like he is every week, my brother, Eddie Campbell.
What's up, Tyler?
Not much, Eddie. Well, this week, a mechanical engineer speaks.
I don't know why you got to do that every week.
Do what? What did I do?
You got to be a goober right before we do the intro. And I come in laughing like an idiot at nothing, no apparent thing.
I mean, well, I just gave Patrick a compliment here. That's it. That's all. That's all. It's not weird.
I got to pick at you about something.
What?
Not even pick at you. Maybe this is an intervention. You've got a bit of an addictive personality.
What do you mean, Big Dan?
There's a new thing in your life that you've had in your life for 5 minutes. And now you're the biggest proponent of pickleball on the planet.
I am.
And you've been doing this hobby for how long?
I've played once.
And you're like...
I'm in it, man. I'm there.
Have you bought a racket?
Yes. Ask me how much it was.
How much?
$150.
No! You got the A-lister.
Oh, yeah, baby. Oh, yeah. I was like, oh, it's got the honeycomb on the inside? Oh, we doing that. Oh, yeah. That's going to make me hit better. I was like, I want to make sure it had like the grippies on it and stuff too. One time.
One time you played.
I do have a problem.
Okay. Patrick, like the deal.
What are you trying to say here?
Okay, the other day, you were actually ready to go all in on a pickleball development, an indoor pickleball development.
Patrick, do you want in on the ground floor of this? I feel like this could be a good investment for you.
Actually, I'm seeing pickleball everywhere. I'm not kidding.
It's everywhere, right? Have you played yet?
I have not played.
Oh, dude. It's so much fun. I'll buy you a racket. It's going to be great.
$150 racket? Count me up.
All right. Like, this podcast is paying off. I got a pickleball racket and everything.
Best value, sell the racket.
Yeah. No. Okay, so I did the thing. I'll fess up, all right? Again, dude, every week I'm fessing up with something. Seriously, I've got an issue. Issues. Oh, don't open that, Ben. Don't open that, Tyler. Move on. Anyway, so I was like, dude, it's raining. Because it's raining so much down here in Milledgeville. Like, it's driving me flipping crazy. I played once, it started raining, and I haven't been able to go out since. So now I'm just like looking out the window, holding my racket, and just kind of crying. So I was like, I wonder if there are like any indoor pickleball places near us. Well, we're in Milledgeville, Georgia. Let me answer that for you. No, there are not. But there are some in Atlanta. And they're pretty freaking awesome. It's like they converted TJ Maxx into like this pickleball like subscription who's it thingy, right? I started looking at it. I was like, I could do that. I could make that happen. And then I started looking at the prices. They're like $150 a month for a subscription for one person, $200 or something for two. Like that's good money. All right, I'm for it.
That is good money. I had to remind you too that we did one 4 or 5 years ago called Chicken N Pickle.
Hey, yeah. I don't know how they do that though.
Hey, the first time you get a set of drawings that say Chicken N Pickle on them, I mean, you start asking some questions about what you're about to do. Like, I didn't know what is a Chicken N Pickle. So that bore out some explanation. But I did get the fastest growing game in America explanation.
I know what both a chicken and a pickle are. It's putting them together. It's a little confusing. Anyway, Patrick, dude, we just kind of ran off the rails immediately here, as we do. Why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. Patrick Fernbach. I'm a mechanical engineer. Been designing commercial buildings now for about 10 years. And I actually stumbled into this career. Didn't even realize that, going to college and thought I'd be working on combustion engines, and showed up at the office and they're like, hey, there's these blue lines. Take these paper highlighted blue lines and put them in CAD. Here's a blue button. I didn't know what a duct was. And now I just kind of stumbled into learning things. And now I guess I know a little bit. So here I am.
Ready to start designing the next pickleball court of America. TM. Anyway, so you fall into this and stuff. How long have you been doing this now? Did you say?
About 10 years. Yeah.
Heck yeah. So just enough time to start to get a little salty, which is just perfect for us because we want to open up some of the wounds, but also hear some of the good stuff about being a mechanical engineer, right? So I kind of tasked you with like coming up with some ideas, right? Some different things of like, what makes a project go well, what makes a project go bad, like all of those things, so we can give feedback to a lot of the contractors that are listening and continue that feedback loop, right? So let's start with the ugly, and then we can end on like a high note, on a good note.
Yeah.
So like, what makes projects difficult for you guys? Like as a mechanical engineer, what drives you crazy? What grinds your gears?
Yeah, I'd say I'd start with like construction's a little broken. We got some work to do, right? And I think the one thing that I've noticed over my career so far is that contractually, like trades and engineers are just at opposite ends of everything, right? And when you look at how the contracts are kind of written, you've got the owner, and then under that, they usually have two separate chains of contracts. So you've got the architect, design team, design professionals, and you've got the GC and trades, right? And if you looked at that in any other like industry on the face of the earth, right, you'd be like, wow, they're at odds with each other. And I think that's the thing that like really sets us up to have some like unhealthy projects, so that we can't really execute projects as a project team and collaborate. Like there's the whole RFI chain, that just kicks off just this dispute of engineer versus trade. And I think as I've kind of grown through working on more design build, the cool thing is that the closer I get to trades, the easier my job actually gets, because we're really approaching it with our own set of expertise and just providing value in our own way. But I think, just there's a lot of growth that still needs to happen there, across the industry. Some specific things. I mean, it's like, I've actually had like plumbing contractors that have tried to do that. And unfortunately, like, this one individual called me and he was trying to get me to reroute some stuff, make a 3/4 inch pipe, a 1/2 inch pipe. And I was trying to make it work from an engineering perspective to try to help the trades out. And what ended up happening was I was calling the GC and the architect. I'm like, hey, I need to loop you all in on this. And the GC was like, whoa, what do you mean? I told him 2.5 months ago to fix that pipe in that wall, that kind of stuff. And I was like kind of thrown in front of the bus a little bit. And I'm just kind of looking at like, wow, maybe if I would have known about that 2.5 months ago, right? But it's that kind of stuff that unfortunately happens in construction. And I can't help but think like, are we doing it to ourselves? I mean, I tell trades all the time, the amount of ductwork I have personally hung is zero, right? Like I just don't have that expertise. And yet I can tell you how to size a duct. I can tell you static pressure, heat transfer, right? And the trades are telling me the same thing. I've hung thousands of miles of ductwork, but yet like I need you to tell me and push back on me. And I think that's the strongest trades, is when they're looking at me as an engineer and going, I actually need you to push back on me and tell me when I'm making a decision that's detrimental to the owner, right? So a lot to babble on about, but yeah, I mean, that's the kind of stuff I'm seeing. I think it's a total industry issue.
Eddie, please take off. Enjoy.
Well, I'm curious. So obviously, yeah, I mean, we got communications. We've got issues in the construction industry, as outlined in previous Construction Brothers podcasts. But I would want you to go maybe to the other side of the spectrum too, and bite the hand that feeds you and talk about the architectural side. Like, how is it dealing with owner architect end of the spectrum, as opposed to the trades?
Yeah, I think it's a totally different dynamic. I mean, quite honestly, it's almost like you've got a different job. I mean, that's the best way I can put it, because you're trying to design under different constraints when you're working direct for an architect. And I've signed proposals for an architect and for a contractor. I hold proposals and contracts for both of them. And it is just a totally different conversation. I don't know if I want to sit here and say it's bad, right? But we're designing under different constraints, and we're trying to put together a program. You're trying to make the owner, like I can see the architects trying to make the owner happy. They want to make sure that their floor plan is, aesthetically pleasing and flows really well, and all those conversations. MEP always gets cut out. I mean, the amount of conversations of like, can we naturally ventilate the space, right? I don't want to even provide cooling, and like, I don't want to see air devices in the space at all. Like those types of constraints, I get it, right? But at the same time, it's honestly, it impacts the trades. And I think now, like, we're seeing more engineers that are going, that is going to be a pain to install. Like you're asking me to do something, and I can do it. I can show it on paper, and I'm sure there's a foreman out there that can lead a team and they can install it. but your labor hours are through the roof. But we don't have that perspective in those designs. And, you want high ceilings, you want all the cool stuff, right? But I think that's the huge delta of, just working with an architect is you just don't have that expertise and you don't have the constraints that the trades bring, right? Managing schedule, managing cost, managing is this even feasible and constructible? And I think what I see with my contracts under trades is they're actually pulling me into design meetings with the owner. The architect's there, right? So it's I don't know if I can really fairly say that the architect is the problem, right? But because they're in those meetings and when the trades are there and the GC's there and we're all talking about it, it's the same conversation we were trying to have over here, but for some reason there's a different outcome. And I can't help but think it's just because everybody's at the table, right? It's not, we don't have this stay in your lane mentality because we're all trying to come up with a great solution. The architect's just throwing ideas out. Hey, aesthetically, can we do this? The trades are trying to make it happen, but also coming at it with that's not feasible or it's feasible, but here's what it's going to take me in labor. So I think it's just a totally different dynamic. It's really interesting because like I said, it's two different jobs. I mean, I have to flip a switch. Okay, this is a, very collaborative job. Okay, this is a follow, stay in your lane type of cultural job. And that's the huge delta that I see.
That seems to be kind of a problem with a design build sort of scenario. Yeah. Would I be wrong in saying that?
What do you mean?
So if you're designing with the architect and the owner in that capacity, you're putting a lot of effort into the design drawings, but you're not necessarily engaging with the sub trades or the specialty trades within that design. And so decisions that are made kind of in a bubble will have ramifications out into the job site. So it's almost almost saying hey, design build's great, but this could potentially be an issue that you need to overcome.
I mean, I see the design build process as actually kind of a catalyst to adding. So it's kind of a form and function thing, right?
Yeah.
Right. So maybe the architect's more, preoccupied with the form, whereas the DB, design builder, is more preoccupied with the function. And I mean, the design builder maybe being, and I'm going to pigeonhole, but maybe being a little more of an analytical builder side is going to probably default more to the constructability and costing sides of things, which makes them a lot more of a pragmatist when it comes to design. Which that sounds like what I hear you describing, Patrick, is this is two different mentalities, two different mindsets that are coming in. One is concerned about the look of a thing or pleasing an owner and their, preoccupation with what a space is going to be like when I walk into it. Whereas the other understands that, I can do that, but that's going to be this much cost add, this much schedule add. So you can have it, but you're sacrificing another thing. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think it's a great point, Eddie. I mean, that conversation, though, the second half of that conversation doesn't always happen. And I think that's the challenge, right? If you've only got yes people in the room with a certain set of experience, it's yes, we can do that. No problem. We can show it in a model. We can show it on paper. And you don't have the person with the other critical piece, to your point. Yeah, I think it's a great point.
As we move kind of beyond the, you're working with the architect owner. Obviously, you got a general contractor, design builder you're working with, and you're trying to get that sub-trade feedback. Get into the nitty-gritty a little bit. What are the specific things that will break a job in your realm? What are the things that you're just that's frustrating, that busted every time?
I'd say, honestly, Eddie, kind of back to the architect, to be honest, I think the thing that is really challenging is when we go to execute a job and then it keeps changing, right? And so imagine trying to play basketball, but the basketball hoop keeps moving along the side of the court and it also keeps changing in size and height, right? And so sometimes we start executing, we got a plan together, we start executing, we start modeling, designing, we're selecting equipment. Oh, we're going to split this space. We're going to rearrange it. Oh, okay. Well, what that really means for us is we have a lot of rework, right? It's not oh, okay, no problem. We don't have really that much to do. We just add an air device, right? There's a whole conversation of rerunning the load and accounting for the heat gain and accounting for the people. To your point, making sure that ductwork fits. Is it a critical space that needs a separate zone? Does that even work with our system type that we initially picked out? There's a lot that a lot of work that goes into that. And I think the biggest challenge is one, every time those changes and adaptations kind of happen on the design side, every time our team has to change our design is a potential for a mistake or a miss. And that's like a construction, right? I mean, that's not like our team isolated. We only deal with that. I see it across the board. Everybody I talk to is like, every time something changes, it's just, you're increasing the risk on the job, right? And so it's like the whole model lock concept, like, can we just get this nailed down? Like, tell us when to go. You know, a lot of teams, from what I've heard, is like, and even our team, we're really quick, like say go and we're running, right? And we're super efficient. We can design things. And it's when you're in the middle of your stride, it's like, okay, stop, because we actually going to change this. Or with BIM 360, it's like a huge challenge, right? Because it's all live. So it's really hard. Like it's actually really easy to change things and coordinate them, but it's actually really hard to track the changes because it's just so fluid in the design realm, and you don't know what's locked. You don't know what's not. I mean, and I think it's a lot more like project management to just wrangle, okay, what is changing, what is adapting, and managing. Honestly, it's change management at that point, right? I mean, so I don't know what you guys are seeing, but I think it's that's one of the biggest pain points. You know, let us execute really well once, and we can do it really quick the first go around. You know, and I feel like, and at the same time, we have to almost be involved early on, right? As an engineer, I mean, we want to consult on energy usage and zoning and control and make sure that, you know, we are allocating space for ductwork above the ceiling. And there's big, high level, just kind of areas and pathways is the language we try to use around it. Just trying to allocate space for that early on in design. So we need to be brought in early, but it's like, sometimes the ask is like, well, we just want to see a set and review it. You know, we want to see duct mains, and it's like, that's like 85% of our design for HVAC, right? Because now I got the load calc done, I got the zoning done, I had to place the air handlers, and now I got the duct main in there. So the only thing I really have left is air devices and branches, you know, which is the easy stuff to coordinate, right? So I got 85% done, and then we change it up. I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges. Now I'd say that we have overcome it a little bit just through, you know, communicating more. I mean, we've got custom software that starts tracking changes in the model so we can pinpoint it. So all those things, like in the BIM world, makes it a lot easier to track than in the CAD world, where you just got, here's a new DWG, load it in. So, I mean, there's a lot there, but that's one of the biggest pain points for sure.
I always referred to that as the ripple effect. We always did. You know, just whenever you get asked to change something, you pull the string and then the whole thing unravels. Like, I know you have experienced that multiple times. Any person who's done like BIM in any capacity has felt that just sinking feeling of pulling the string and watching Humpty Dumpty just fall off the wall and crack open. And it's really sad. It's really sad.
Well, it's really sad too. I tell our teams, like, okay, just kind of expect the changes, right? Expect the unexpected. And I think if we go into jobs with like that mindset of this is going to change, it just makes it a little easier to accept, you know, quite honestly. Whereas to your point, like, it's like, oh, I thought this model was locked. I thought we were done. And now I have to redesign it. And it's the 8th time, right? And it's, but I think the mindset is like super critical there. It sets ourselves up for success more so than anything, instead of just being deflated, you know. And I'm sure the trades probably deal with that the same. I mean, I don't know. You guys probably have more exposure to that feedback than I do, but
it's I've heard it called the iterative process of design, which is, you know, the fancy pants way of saying it changes until it doesn't anymore. And there are all kinds of things that drive that. You bring up BIM 360, and that's interesting because I've heard gripes about how designs get just kind of like chucked over the fence on a platform like that. And I know that this can happen in here's a background, good luck, but how much more important is it to communicate changes? Like, if you're a designer, if you're an architect and you've got a mechanical consultant on board, how important is it to communicate the changes you're making when that's real time? Like, it's happening right now.
Yeah, I'd say it's critical. I mean, just a question for you guys. I mean, how much have you heard about meetings lately? I mean, do you feel like meetings are on the rise? Like, everybody's just calendars are full of meetings?
I've got, so many. That's my whole life. It feels like now is meetings. But when I was a detailer, not as much. There was definitely a rise during 2020. Obviously,
They're easier to have now.
They're much easier to have now.
Yeah.
People are used to them,
especially with the Teams and Zoom and Meet and everything else. So,
a lot more coordination calls. You had coordination calls, I'm sure, recently. Where you're sitting in there and we're putting all of all of the models into a single platform and like looking for clashes and different things like that.
Yeah.
And those are just a joy to be a part of.
Why do you ask?
So yeah, I bring it up because I think, Eddie, to your point, it's like, BIM 360, there's a lot more changes happening. Communication is actually more critical. And so I'm almost like, is the increase in meetings and just collaboration meetings because it's easier virtually because we're all used to the virtual Teams and Zoom? Or is it actually because at the same time, there was this huge, BIM 360 construction cloud push. And so we're actually seeing those coordination meetings happen out of necessity because of how the systems that are being pushed on the design team, right? So it's like, it's easier to have. I don't know, like there's a lot of meetings we have. It's like, I don't know if we could cut it out, right? Like there are some meetings that I think everybody probably could, but there's some that's like, yeah, we should look at this in the model. We need to be in Navis and we need to be just talking about all the changes and understanding, the consequences of when these things change so quickly. So, my new theory is like, I think meetings are actually not because of COVID and Teams and Zoom. It's actually because we're cloud-based. I mean, we're real-time updating things, and it's actually requiring the level of communication of like what you're saying, Eddie. I mean, I don't know. I could be totally off base, but it's just, I look at everybody's calendar. It's like, oh, that's a coordination call with an owner and an architect. That's a coordination call with, trades members and a GC. It's like, what do you say no to that? Like, so it's interesting, but yeah.
Well, the tools are making us go faster in a lot of ways, but the speed, I almost feel like, you're running down the road and stuff's falling off and you have to go back up the road and go pick up everything that fell off of the bus as you came down, like with your hair on fire. So, I mean, doing something once right, to your point earlier, is easier than having to do it, undo it, do it again. And I don't know, we have talked a good deal about the velocity of construction, how it's increased and how it's impacting us.
Yeah.
And you've got to see that. I mean, like, you've been in the construction industry a decade. Are you feeling like the timeframes are crunching in comparison to what you saw when you first got in?
Absolutely. Yeah, hands down. I mean, and I don't know if it's one issue. I think it's just like, to your point, it's just the industry is just going there. And I think it is actually the convergence of the whole manufacturing, industrialized construction overlaid on the construction industry that we just don't have the processes that like the car industries have and these huge manufacturers that build all of these things, to your point, Eddie, on really tight timelines. Construction's just not there yet. And I think right now what's cool is I think we're actually in a transition period of getting there. And I don't know if like we totally realize that's what's happening. You play it out over 5-10 more years and like there's some pretty cool stuff that we're working on. And it's just like one step at a time. But at the same time, like the expectation is like, why aren't you there yet? Right. It's like, well, I mean, we have to mobilize. The trades have to just totally change their processes. Right. The design team has to think differently. We got to have different conversations. Like our contracts on construction jobs need to be totally rewritten and restructured. Like there's a lot to unpack there. So it's not as easy as like, we're just going to jump down an assembly line and build the next, whatever office building, right? It's not that simple. There's a lot there. So I don't know. I mean, how do you feel about that? Do you feel like there's some validity to that, or?
I like that. I like that thought, man. Like I like the thought of it. It's an industrialized sort of thing. Like we're trying to turn construction into more of like a manufacturing mindset. And I think the reality of that is, at least from what we've talked about extensively, is that there needs to be so much more time dedicated to the actual design and the coordination on the front end in order to make that a reality, right? You think about a car, it doesn't just go through and, it doesn't just go through the assembly line on a half-baked model, right? Like if we want things to go smoothly, we have to sit back and we have to evaluate. And we have to also have feedback again from people on the line saying, hey guys, just letting you know, I'm having to like knock this into place like 3 or 4 times every time. And so like you get the door knockers, which we've talked about in the past, like, was it Toyota that did that? They removed like the door knockers. So like, I like that thought of like, we are in this transitionary time of like, we're coming from this place of that craft model of everybody goes their own way and comes back together and puts everything back, puts everything together in this one little area. We're moving from that craft mindset over into a manufacturing mindset. And yeah, things are definitely going to fall off of the table while we're doing that.
Well, what kind of good things are happening on your work? Like
Let's get
what
positive
kind of
here.
Yeah, what kind of things do we want to repeat? What kind of things do you want to see repeated?
Yeah, I think there's a ton of really great things that are going on in construction. I mean, as much as it's like, hey, we got a lot of work to do, we also have a lot of really great things going on. I mean, so I personally run a lot of design build work. I think, on the design build front, I'm seeing just an entire different perspective on how to run a job. Our contract being tied directly to the contractors, working through, I mean, just imagine getting a kickoff, right, from a project. And instead of, okay, I'm going to go ahead and run a load calc and I'm going to do my typical engineer thing, there's a mechanical there, right? They're pulling me into the job. They're like, hey, you've got the expertise in the speed to deliver engineering drawings. I've got the expertise on managing lead times, managing schedule, managing cost, and the constructability side. And oh, by the way, I've got a fab shop, right? Okay, cool. We're locked in. We got all of our strengths at play. That first kickoff meeting is like, all right, let's just start. What's our approach? Right? Let's just think through. I'm going to hit it from an engineering perspective. You're going to hit it from the constructability perspective. And I come at it with like a rough energy model. Here's the 3 system types. What are you thinking? Oh, chillers are 52 weeks out. That's insane. We can't do a 4-pipe system on this. And you back into the optimal design. And I think that those conversations are actually starting to show up more and more on design bid build. So I think like there's a lot of good things going on there. I think the other thing is that everybody's being a lot more aware of the detailing that's needed in the design, even though the timelines are still pretty condensed and we really need to execute really quickly. I'm also seeing like an expectation that like I should be able to build from this permit set. And I think that is a fair expectation. I think it's really challenging because like I said, you don't have everybody at the table on every job. But I think the fact that we're having those conversations and actually thinking about, at least from our team is like, we're working with GCs, working on modular jobs. And the conversation is like, that's great, but can it be built? Like, let's design it one time so that it can actually be constructed. And, oh, these are modules. Let's think about the mate line coordination, right? Let's really unpack how this is going to be, framed in. Let's understand, oh, this has to ship across the country. How are you actually flashing that curb in? And all of those conversations are happening in the design phase, which I think is good, right? Like I think all of that, and there's really healthy conversations. Now it's not widespread. I'd say it's pretty isolated, but I mean, I'm seeing it. I don't know what you guys are seeing, but I'm definitely seeing it. I mean, are you guys seeing more of that upfront expectation of do it once, do it right?
I think we need to go there. I haven't seen any kind of significant uptick in the detail and structural documentation. Maybe to the contrary, I actually see in some regards less detail and structural documentation now than I have before. Less like specific detailing and more of a propensity to kick things to a delegated designer or somebody else to figure out, kind of in a hand-wavy means and methods. Though I will say that it depends on the team that you're a part of. I have worked in design build scenarios where I would say that it is of the utmost importance that detail happens and that detail is capitalized on, where we're more, I mean, that's what we do, right? We're detailers, so, working hand in hand with a designer to actually bring the detail to bear. In the scenario you're talking about where both parties kind of know, like, all right, you're working here, you have this expertise. I'm working here, I have this expertise. We're going to do our best to respect, kind of those lanes, to not duplicate each other's work, but to work in concert with one another to where we're like complementing and helping each other out. And just, quick phone calls like, hey, what do you think here? Oh, this, and this. All right, cool, got it. And then back to design. So being able to work like to your strengths that way, I'm not going to say that I don't wholeheartedly agree, because I 150% agree with what you're saying. But at large, when I see a lot of design bid build work, I don't see as much of that in the structural design realm, unfortunately, to our detriment.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, like I said, I think it is, it's not widespread, but I am seeing it. I think it's a good thing. I think I'm seeing more engineers trying to understand, how do you install this? You know, how is this constructible? You know, I mean, we're having more vendors really push back on us on it. You know, hey, let's sit down and actually, that's fine. You're speccing us as basis of design, you know, but I actually want to work with you on understanding, is my equipment going to work? I mean, it's actually been a little bit impressive how many vendors have like, I don't think my product's a good fit here. And I'm like, okay, appreciate it. And they're like, I think you should call so-and-so, right? Like that. I don't know if I experienced that 5-6 years ago. And it might be because, like, look, everybody's really busy right now. So, like, there's definitely, like, this mindset of abundance, right? Like, I'm going to be honest with you and push back and, like, tell you that I can't make this work. And I'm going to try to, like, send you on a path of success so that hopefully you come back to me, right? It's that, like, I'm seeing a little bit more of that, at least in our local community, which I think is another good thing. I mean, all these are, like, kind of cultural things that are good, but I think the detail and just engineers wanting to understand that more is another critical part. I mean, I think there's definitely been a push over the last 5 or 6 years that the permit's just not cutting it anymore. You know, I mean, now I don't really talk or deal with a lot of structural, so I don't know if I really, I mean, of course I'm speaking from a mechanical engineering perspective, but you know, I mean, I think there is a lot of good things going on there for sure.
Well, the design build scenario I was talking about, we actually were in charge of the structural and the mechanical, right? So we were working hand in hand with both sides of that design. I'm curious, like the workflow that you see happening, like, so out of your design model, I'm not talking an analytical design, but more like the Revit model that you're getting your drawings out of. Are you pushing that downstream for use in, like, you know, adding fabrication elements and then bringing that to bear for an actual fab effort or production effort?
On design build, absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
like where they're camming out from what you're giving them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many engineers do or don't actually draw in fab parts, but yeah, I mean, we're working with them on loading their services into the model, and then we're drawing all of our content in their fabrication services, making sure the installation spec is on there. You know, I mean, that's like placing hangers. I mean, it's kind of cool because, you know, one of the, you know, this actually happened pretty recently where you have a VDC team that's actually telling me like, oh, this is like, for me to put my installation drawings together, I'm down to like 3 days. You know, I could do each area in about 3 days. Typically would have taken me 3 weeks, right? And I'm going, okay, that's waste, right? We just eliminated 2.5 weeks of waste. And all we had to do was just a little bit of thinking up front, really, right? Like, and honestly, like, you could say it takes a little bit more time. I don't know if it really does, because you still have to draw ductwork. You still have to size it. It's just, you're coming at it from a different perspective, and you're thinking about, you know, what's the roof decking, right? Like, can I actually put a hanger right here, or do I need to put unistrut above, right? Like that, I don't think that happens everywhere. I think that's something that engineers need to continue to do better. But it's also like, the only reason I know that is because I had a journeyman and a tradesman tell me, hey, do you ever think about the deck and how I actually hang things? And I'm like, a few years ago, no, I don't, right? Like, I think about it. I think about the U value. I think about all those things. They're like, well, you understand that when it's like a metal deck, I have to run unistrut across to hang everything if you're not under structure. And I was like, had no idea. You know, like, and that's like thousands of dollars. And all I have to do is just put a different lens on and see the project differently, right? Like, it's okay usually for me to just move my duct over, you know, and just detail it out. So I guess to answer your question, like, yes, fab parts, yes, detailing out more, yes, trying to understand how it's actually being installed, yes, having conversations about king studs, right? I mean, like, those conversations have to happen in your initial design, or else that's the literal waste that we talk about in construction, right? It's design waste is what it is.
Well, you're honing your craft. I mean, having done that, it's like, let's take the decade you've worked on this and say there's been a path of progression where you're providing more and more and more and more. So now you know how this stuff's hung out and everything. So there's a side of this, like this just makes you a more attractive designer to work with. Like this guy is good, he knows his craft, and is going to help the trades out a little more than the next guy. I should work with him, and he's meriting his fee. I'm wondering about fees though, because as you're driving more detail into the design, has your fee changed at all? Like, are you able to adapt your fee structure because you're giving more?
I would say that our fee only changes when we have to be on site consistently. Usually that's a big thing for us. But I mean, it's kind of interesting as a company, our leadership, we went 100% Revit about 6 years ago or so. And I share that because I think that's what got us in this 3D mindset a little different, right? And also we went around the peer groups and we started asking, like, what do you like about us? Right. So it's kind of interesting. Like, I can provide feedback to the trades, but like getting feedback from the trades is really hard because they're a downstream consumer of what I produce. Right. And so usually I'm like, hey, I don't have a CA fee, and they only send me issues, right? I mean, RFIs, sometimes submittals, they're not really issues. And then we never really sit down and actually talk about like, what could I have done better? Right. So I think to your point, our fee doesn't really change, right? I mean, we're just doing it with a different mindset and just thinking about it differently. Now, if you want to talk modular and like getting into the hangers, like that's where, yeah, our fee will change. I mean, we're literally just dumping on more details on our design, but just approaching the design and saving time for VDC on a design build job. I mean, our fee, I don't change it. I mean, I actually have contractors that say, just give me a permit set. That's all I need. I'm like, okay. And, and then I've got contractors that are like, do your thing, right? Like, I just deliver what I deliver. And they're like, I'm good with this. And our fees really don't change unless it's like, hey, I don't need specifications from you. I don't need you to review submittals from me. As you're like really cutting out huge swaths of scope from my proposal. I mean, our approach is just deliver the product that needs to be delivered. I think the other thing that layers onto that, Eddie, because you might be scratching your head going, how's that even possible? Is we have created a lot of custom software for our team that's actually expedited. Like, our process of delivering engineering is pretty streamlined. We've got a whole like tabulated, process for engineering of how we approach the job when we get it. We do our load calcs. So it's all linked to the zone. It's all linked to the equipment. When we schedule it, all the airflow is pushed to the model. Like, there's not a lot of manual, like, what's the area of this room? What's the area of that room? Let me manually put this over here into the software. Okay, let me take that and manually put that into the Revit model. Like, we're just syncing things between databases, and that's where we see the most amount of savings from a labor standpoint. And we dump those savings into our design, right? And provide more value for the downstream consumer, which is the contractor, right? If you think about it, you've got architect, engineer, and then the trades, right? That's the flow of construction. And the owner is always at the beginning and they're always at the end. And so we've actually flipped our mindset of, we still try to serve the architect, right? Yeah, you want a permit? Yeah, you want us to consult? Yes, you want us to think about energy, but we're also flipping the mindset of, what are we doing for the trades, right? What is the value that we provide? Like, we're going to send this set out. Somebody's going to bid it. And like, for what? Are they going to take this and just crumble it up and throw it away and redo it? Because if so, like, why do I have a job, right? Like, that's the mindset that we're trying to have, is like, do something with pride and deliver value, right, to your downstream consumer, which is the trade. I can't say that enough. So I don't know. I mean, do you feel like that? I kind of went off the fee discussion a little bit, but you got me fired up, Eddie. That's all I could say.
I'm glad. No, I mean, I don't know. I've got kind of two different sides of me on this thing. I mean, one part of me is like, you have more of an offering than your competitor. So let's say you've automated in savings. You've done the legwork. You've got the automation. And you're competing against other mechanical designers that don't deliver what you deliver. They don't give what you give for the downstream user. And your fee's $5,000 and that other guy's fee's $5,000. And the only difference is whether the person buying that thing is dumb enough to buy the other thing, just not knowing. So there's a part of me that's like, you've increased your offering, you're giving more, and you would like, it would be good for you to be able to capitalize on that. The other side of me is that you've just lapped your competition. You're out front. You're setting the new bar and creating what the deliverable will now look like in 2023 and 2024 and 2025 because of the tooling, because of the automation, and because of what can happen now and will happen now as other people figure it out. You're just out in front. So there are two sides of that I can definitely see, but I see it as a distinct competitive advantage for you guys regardless because your offering has more downstream use. And I think that's what we preach all of the time on this show.
Well, in order to get that downstream use, you have to have the knowledge of the downstream in the design.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of back to where I think we were even started is as we're talking through, and we talked about this with Trevor Owen as well over at Hilti, where it's like how difficult it is to find, BIM people and how much of a unicorn that is, right? Like you want this person that can think analytically, that, can be an engineer, right? But you also want this person who can bring this trade knowledge into the model to make sure that you're optimizing and making it as clean of a process as possible. So it's like, it's great that you're getting out in the field and learning how this stuff like really goes together and some of the issues and all those things. And that's like really the ultimate value that comes with 3D modeling. I don't think people realize how much like field knowledge is required for modeling and doing it super, super well.
Constructively.
Yeah.
I would say that one thing that I'm hearing is that the mechanical realm is different than the structural realm because the downstream use of your design, the design modeling that you do, would be an anomaly in structure. Typically, like the structural engineer may have a model, probably has adopted Revit or some other modeling software, but getting that out of them, and then the ability, Revit does not have the ability as of right now to do everything that needs to be done to produce a set of fabrication documents. It just doesn't, not in steel. Now it does mechanical. Mm-hmm. So it's just, there's some differences there. And I would say the thing that's really, really cool is that you guys are able to take the value you've created in the model that you're designing with and you're giving it to the trades and they're using it. Mm-hmm. There's not like end of life, design thing happened. All right, guys, you guys have fun. And like you were saying, go and recreate everything. That's what I do all day, every day, is I go recreate everything that somebody else already created because either out of fear or not like having some reason, whatever it is, they won't pass it on. Mm-hmm. And it would have been detailed. It wouldn't have been detailed and correct enough for me to use anyway. Honestly, but you guys are actually making it correct enough and constructible enough that somebody can use it. So that it's just very different, but it makes you scratch your head and you just why?
Yeah. And I think the healthy part of that is just having the dialogue around, what can I do better, and just opening that dialogue with trades, even on our design bid build. It's the same conversation. What's interesting is, I'm director of mechanical engineering and I'm always looking for trades to build relationships with, just to ask them, like, have you seen our sets on the street? Give me some feedback, right? Like, tell me, like, did you use it? Did you not? Like, what were the pain points? Because like, you're kind of saying, hey, we're reimagining the deliverable. I don't know if I'm reimagining. I'm just listening to the market, right? I'm listening to the downstream consumer and just actually listening and then reacting. I think the other point, just to go briefly back on fee, is I think there's the $5,000 fee. There's the $5,000 fee. And yeah, you might be right. We might provide more than our competitors. I think you got to be careful for the $2,000 fee, right? Like there's another tier of like just pop out drawings and you can put whatever on the sheet for you. And their goal is to just get that stamp, right? They're not thinking, they're just trying to execute, get it a stamp, give you enough to bid, give you enough. That's the challenge, right? And like, I don't really want to be in a position where we're just giving enough, right? I think it's a reputation ruiner. I think it's one of those things where like you want to do a job and hang your hat on it, right? Like, and you want to set your team up for success. And I think, just be careful of that. And honestly, if you look at that, okay, we're spending $2,000, so we're saving $3,000 on design. Well, what are you spending on the back end, right? For the trades to your point, redo all of that. And like, it's like, we really just need to stop looking at like the siloed fee structures and start thinking about what's the cost of design from start to finish. And that's a really hard thing to measure because trades sometimes don't even account for how much time it took them to coordinate. And VDC, like sometimes that's just baked into their overhead and that's how they build their fees, right? Sometimes it is baked into the actual proposal and it's itemized out. I mean, every trade is a little different. I mean, some trades engineers, they have PEs on staff. They're totally overhead, right? So how do you measure that delta of waste and like fee when it's just all over the place, right? I mean, Eddie, I'm kind of curious, like, does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because buying the bottom of the barrel designer, I feel like the novice builder, the novice contractor, the novice owner is going to buy the $2,000 set. The pro is going to pay the $5,000 every day of the week and twice on Sunday because they know the impact of design. They're buying impact. And the impact is I can build that. That's been planned for. I'm not going to have that conflict. Things are going to move. I'm going to be streamlined. I'm going to be on and off site quicker. Like all of these things, the pro knows I will pay that fee up front because it's going to pay 10x as I go through the process. The novice is going to buy the two. And I hope that we see more people catching on to, I want to operate like a pro. I'm going to plan, then I'm going to build.
That's kind of the value issue I feel like that BIM is going through right now, right? And we always kind of face this of like, how do you value the things that didn't happen, which is like pretty huge. Where it's like, yeah, I prevented this beam from being the wrong size, or I prevented this duct from being the wrong size, or these hangers from going in the wrong places. We caught that early. So we are X amount more valuable than somebody who just does it in 2D or doesn't catch that. It's like, it's kind of nebulous and people are trying to quantify it a little bit more and put it in a place where that novice owner can understand like, oh no, there is importance behind this and that there is value behind, a model or something of like some more coordination, some time spent in design.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So I want to dive in on this hard because this is a recent online conversation that has happened.
Oh, crap.
No, we're still stuck in the
kickback, Patrick.
No, we're still stuck in looking at it. We're still stuck on the, oh, look, a 3D model. I can see it on the screen. That bumps into that. Look at all the value I brought.
Yeah.
I coordinated.
Yeah.
That isn't the biggest value. The biggest value is the information. The biggest value is the database. The biggest value is if Patrick hands me a design that I can build, Patrick handed me a design that I can bid effectively. He's taken questions out of the design now. I know what I'm building, and I will get tighter numbers as a result. If I'm daring enough, if I've got the wit as a builder to be able to go out and use that to bid from. Contractors, DBs, are not leveraging this to the extent they could be. There are some that are smart, and they're driving the industry in the right direction, and I applaud them for it, but they're not nearly common enough. We're still fraught with DBs, general contractors, owners, whatever, that are looking at the clash detection meeting in Navisworks going, ooh, I did BIM. And that's not even the big value. Yeah, the beam's not supposed to bump into the duct. Big whoopity-doo. I mean, like, don't do the thing. I know what that duct is worth.
Right.
That's the value. I get angsty on that. Now I'm fired up, dude.
You get bonus points for saying big whoopity doo.
Whoopity doo in my best Adam Sandler voice, buddy.
Holy cow.
Yeah, I'll go off on that.
I'm aware.
So thank you.
That's why I told you to kick back there, Patrick. Knew what was coming.
Here we are.
Well, can I add on to it? Because I think if Eddie and I just, are you ready for this to be a 4-hour podcast? Like,
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's just clear the afternoon. So to your point, I actually pulled these stats because I figured this might come up. And like, Eddie, yes. Like, I think it's all about the information and the data in the model. We work with contractors on design build projects before they write the proposal. And the reason we do that is because they get a narrative that is watered down and they can't, how do you bid off of that, right? There's that question, right? You get a floor plan from an architect. That is a pretty good floor plan, right? It gives you enough, but it doesn't give the trades, the subs, the MEP trades, and probably structural. I mean, I would just guess enough to actually bid. And actually it doesn't give structural enough to bid because you don't have my stuff in there. So how do you know what to frame around, right? How do you know what to account for on the roof? And so I think, we actually get contracted early on. We do some IFCOM work with some key partners and we receive all this information. We work directly with their teams and they get 3 weeks to bid it. We do like in a week and a half, we try to put together a really good set that they can hard bid off of. Now, here's the critical part. They hard bid that set and then they put our drawings and their bid and the counts in the proposal, right? And it's like, hey, this is what we bid off of. We had this narrative. We're trying to make your dreams into a reality. And this is what your dream could look like. We can adapt it. Yes, of course we can. But this is just our take on it, right? The other thing is, so we actually just did a job as a high rise downtown Cincinnati. We designed all the sheet metal and I actually pull a sheet metal schedule. It actually gives pounds of sheet metal in it. And we were at, our model accounted for 102,000 pounds of sheet metal. After VDC and everything came out, it was 104,000 pounds of sheet metal. So we were within 3%, which is like, that is pretty good. In my opinion, like that is pretty good. So they based their number off of that 102,000 and they came in at 104. I mean, they're a little higher, but also I know that this project in particular, like they changed 3 floors from office to apartments, right? They changed ceilings. We had structure after they did partial demo that we had to deal with. And so the fact that we really only came out delta of 3%, pretty impressive, right? So to your point, Eddie, like that's a specific example of like how to use that and extract it.
I love it. I love the construction application of design, BIM, like you're driving it into the field, which is where it's happening. You're driving it into cost. It's where we need to be. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we get a lot of chatter about the pretty pictures and all of these other things in the industry of like, architecturally, yeah, you can create some amazing renderings out of 3D. That's great. Awesome. Man, if that's where you're at though, you got to dig a little deeper because there's so much more value underneath the surface of this. Do some more digging on it. How can this, again, be leveraged to plan my buying, like my entire buying cycle? How can I leverage this to give trades all of the information that they need to bid really tight, like bid in a really tight cluster? Because that's kind of the dream, right? It's like, oh, they're all right there. Holy crap.
You and I have seen this happen where you are handing a fabricator,
yep,
here's what I need. And it's amazing when you give these subcontractors who are pros,
yep,
the information they need. They know what it costs. And they're covering themselves for unknowns. If you can take those unknowns away, they no longer have to cover themselves for those things. And that has huge value. That has a lot more value than a $3,000 delta between design fees.
Yeah, those contingencies.
One line item.
Those
one
contingencies can get pretty big.
I mean,
pretty freaking big.
$3,000 can happen in a momentary. I wasn't real comfortable with these drawings right before you turn that bid in. I mean, let's be honest. The bid's about to go in, and you're like, man, I just can't get comfortable with these design docs. I don't feel good. Ratchet up. I'm going to throw 10 in there. I'm going to throw
Just in
10. I'm going
case.
to throw 10 more in there. I'll just cover, right? Because you're trying to make sure you got it all.
Mm-hmm.
And you're trying to make sure when the contractor comes back with that one thing that you didn't have, you can look at him and say, yeah, I got that. Yeah, that's in scope. There went 5 of the 10 that I had squirreled away. So take the guesswork out.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, taking the guesswork out. That's a great way of putting it. All right. Well, so we've we've hit a lot of stuff today. All right, we have hit a lot of stuff today, and that's great. I love it because I think hopefully somebody's going to get some good food for thought out of this and things too. Patrick, I want to ask you our megaphone question though, to kind of get this point just the rest of the way home. All right. So if we gave you a megaphone in around 60 seconds, maybe a little bit more, to say something to the construction industry, what would you want to say, man? What would you want people to take and run with?
Yeah, Tyler, it's a great question. Where my head goes immediately, 60 seconds on the clock. Trust isn't a soft skill, right? It's a project multiplier. And, I love take the guesswork out of it, but build strong partnerships, build strong teams, execute projects really well, show up with mutual respect for one another, show up respecting each other's strengths, and also being aware of each other's weaknesses on the project team. So that's very cultural. I think the other thing that I would shout from the rooftops is everything we've talked about today, which is BIM. Don't BIM for BIM's sake. BIM because there's intentionality behind it. Be intentional when you model, be intentional when you design, and think about what value you're creating. It's about value. It's not about, I'm in Revit, I'm in BIM. What value did you create? Go out in the world and do great things and create value for the downstream consumer, for the owner, and that will make us all better. If we're all trying to create value for one another, we all get better, we all grow, we're all having better conversations, we're all pushing each other, having some professional contention, and that's where we get to a point where as a construction industry, people want to come to this industry and work because it's fun. We can enjoy our jobs. We can feel prideful about the projects that we work on, and we can play in our strengths. So show up, build relationships, take pride in your job. I think that's pretty succinct. I don't know if that was 60 seconds or not, but
maybe a little over, but it's all good, man. Those are good things. Those are things we try to shout from the rooftops too. So we're right there with you.
yeah, that's why I like you guys.
Heck yeah, man. Well, Patrick, thanks for joining us this week, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great connecting with you guys and, honestly just getting to know you guys. So hopefully this won't be our last path crossing here.
For sure. Heck yeah.